Welcome, everyone, to Mark Rober's monthly class. Here with TA Office Hours, I'm Mark, and I'm joined by Ryan and Grant. Gentlemen, how you doing tonight?
Doing
Doing
great.
fine. Yeah, it's been a good week. How about you?
Oh, doing okay. I'm ready for the week to wrap up, but we've got all these students that are turning to electronics, so thanks for joining me out here tonight. Hopefully we can help them out. Grant, how about you,
Yes,
buddy? How's your week?
it's been great. It's been very busy. I've been building a lot of stuff and doing a lot of work, but it's been very productive in a positive way, and made a lot of progress on all the projects I'm working on. So I couldn't be happier.
Oh, very cool. Well, we've got a lot to talk about tonight. I know we want to talk about electronics and maybe show off some student work, but before we do, we are fortunate enough to already have our first student, our participant actually. So, Francis, I'm going to bring you in, and maybe you can just share with us what you hope to get out of the evening. You're live, Francis.
Hi, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
No, it's
I'm
fine.
having audio issues.
We can hear
this
you
is-
just fine.
I-
And now we can't. Well, we had you, Francis. Okay, I'm going to put you back in the waiting room for a minute and give you a minute to work on that, and then I'll try you again in a minute or two. But we do have people joining us online, and we'd like to make this time valuable for you. So, and there's a little bit of a delay, so I'm going to ask the question and then ask Ryan to share something. But what can we do with you folks tonight to make this time valuable? And then Ryan, you had a project you were pretty impressed with. Would you like to share it?
Oh, was that the one I shared the other night? Because I didn't bring that. I have it here.
No. The one you like.
The
3
student
minutes ago.
project. The student
Yeah.
project. Yeah, sure. Let's bring that up. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I wasn't.
No,
clear
that's
there.
okay. That's okay. It's been a long day. Here we go.
Okay. Let me
So I
add
should be
that
able
to
to share this
screen.
now. So I just saw this today, and I thought this was a really, really interesting project. This is a pill dispenser, and it pretty much speaks for itself. So I'll just wonder if I can full screen this.
I'm going to try to make this quick. This is my Vend of Vitamin project.
If you click expand, that might do it.
That might do it. You're right. I haven't used it on the computer yet. Is this large enough for you guys?
That's
works.
great.
I'm going to try to make this quick. This is my Vend of Vitamin project. First prototype, Mark Rober's creative engineering class, October 2nd, 2021. It is 11:51 p.m. Central Time. And this was almost the end of me. So anyway, this is my vitamin Vend, all mechanical supplement vendor. So it kind of works like this. Just load it up with supplements you like to load it up with. Let's get that here. So we'll just load these babies.
So the video is a little laggy, but we're getting quite a bit of it. It's actually really good.
Yeah, the project's really well done.
fine.
I don't know, maybe it's how the distance from where I am.
Okay.
But I just thought this was really, really well done for a first timer to get into this and do this is pretty impressive.
I don't know.
I love the acrylic.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
was
It
gonna
looks
say,
so cool. I love acrylic.
acrylic done this well. I don't know if we're dealing with a first timer.
well,
Yeah, I don't-
that's true.
those are some nicely cut pieces there.
Combinations of which you can select from.
I mean, they would have had to know to pick, extruded over cast, or they would have
True.
cracked features that thin.
Alert.
Maybe we have a ringer. I don't know.
Looks cool. I don't know if those are like real supplements or not, but at the very least, if they're just like empty capsules, they do a good job at like illustrating different supplements in the tubes. It looks visually cool.
Yeah, I love that you can see everything, and he'll explain later, but you can select the different ones while they come out, and it's
Coin-operated system here, but
Yeah, really
I
awesome.
want to take it another
Oh, really?
few hours that I just didn't have.
Well, I
Oh,
can't.
think
I don't
see
know if
how
we're
it
going to be able to
works.
see the mechanism well enough, and I don't know if we want to spend 5
is
minutes
it
on
is
it.
it cutting out that bad for you?
Now, when you want to,
Well, the audio's not
for instance,
there.
load yourself
Oh,
on my end anyway.
with this.
Oh,
very, very
I hear audio.
So you can turn the knob.
Oh, I'll be quiet
And
then.
so, like for instance, like let's turn it to happy. Let me see if you can see. Let's turn it to
Turn
happy.
Well,
to
I'll let him
happy.
just do his first his first couple turns here, and then we can pause it.
So
Okay.
if I had time, you put the coin in and then push the button. And that would load your combination of your happy supplements. And those happy supplements, then when you release the button, fall out
Wow.
and vend right here for you. Let's see if I can catch that again. So you choose, now this time we would choose a different setting. Maybe we choose that, hey, instead of happy, we want to start out the morning alert. So we would turn our dial to, we would turn our dial to alert. Of course, nothing happens now. The supplements don't load until you put a coin in. If I did have that another hour or two to work on that, push the button. The alert supplements load into the slot. Pull the button back. Oh, come on, baby. Oh, I guess there's no room in there. Oh, I need to leave more room for the.
Wow.
So anyway,
I appreciate that he left that as is of his project being like not 100% functional.
well, that's what you run into, right? As making
Yeah,
a prototype, you'll find out whether or not it'll work or not. But
It's funny, when I submitted my first project for this class, when I took it, the exact same thing happened to me, and I was like, "Do I refilm this?" And I was like, "No, I'm gonna leave this
no,
in. I'm gonna
you
leave
might as
this
well
in."
show
It
it.
didn't
Yeah,
work, and it was really
yeah.
funny. It was like the first time I tested it, nothing worked. I reset it all. It worked the second time. It's funny.
Yeah, I kind of
Wow.
did the same thing with my project, right? Like when you start filming and something goes wrong, like you just kind of roll with it. I did a whole 10-minute long like YouTube video when I submitted one of mine, and I tried to just show some of the process, right? You just kind of show like this is where I'm at now. Like hopefully you'll get better at it, and towards the end of the project, you showcase what it can do. But like it's fine to get in there and show what you run into, the problems you might run into, and the things you might see. So, yeah, for sure, I did the same thing.
So I didn't because, and I'm sure nobody believed me, but for the first time in my life, my project worked the first time.
Oh yeah, I bet.
Nice.
I'm serious. No machining,
Hmm.
just everything just fit together perfectly. But since I lie a lot, people don't believe me. I don't know what it is. Anyhow, let's see if we can get Francis back. So Francis, we're going to try you again. If you want to go ahead and unmute your microphone there, we'll see. And the question is, what would you like to get out of this evening? So welcome again, Francis.
Hi, I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Beautifully, yes.
Okay, sorry. I was having, gosh, I'm sorry. Obviously, I'm very not that skilled technology-wise. I'm total beginner. My project is made out of cardboard. I did go to the Lowe's. I don't even own a drill. I did get some PVC type pipes, and I got a what do you call that? A razor that has a handle. So I'm very beginner. So I'm just trying to absorb as much information. I did see in the peer group that the TA had said there was going to be this video, this YouTube kind of TA session. So I was just trying to learn more. I've been looking at the other projects in the peer group, and it's so funny because I'm with the kids group, so which is fine with me. But I definitely see more advanced people, and I see some of the TA comments are like, "Oh, you should try a DC motor or AC motor," and I'm like, "Gosh, I hope that's covered in the next session because I don't even know what they're talking about." So I'm just trying to listen and learn and see. I still actually I haven't quite finished my final build, but I'm still putting that together for tonight's deadline.
So I've got two things to say. First of all, just because you go out and spend a bunch of money on fancy materials doesn't make your project good. And just because you're using cardboard doesn't make your project bad. I've spent the last 3 nights, going to sleep, trying to figure out how I could make like a one-piece cardboard trigger. Like that's my nighttime sleepy time routine. It's a great material. It's all over the place. I mean, I get boxes here all day, every day. Anyways, so don't worry about the materials. The second thing is everybody starts at a different rung on the ladder, right? All that matters is that you keep climbing. that you keep trying to improve. So who cares where you're at now? It's, where are you going to be a week from now? Where are you going to be a year from now? Because it doesn't. Anyways, that's the end of my rants. I'll let the other TAs chime in.
I think you're exactly right. I think we're all on a different level. I think you guys probably know a lot more in terms of electrical engineering than I do. Like, I tend to be more 3D modeling, computer aided design. And the reason I even took this class was to get more knowledge in this whole idea of DC motors and trying to hook these things up. So I'm in your boat, Francis. Like, I feel the same way. Sometimes, there's other people in your peer group that might be doing more advanced things than you. It doesn't mean you can't come up with a cool project. I'd actually be curious to hear what your project is.
Well, thank you so much for the encouragement. My project is, it was a absentee Halloween machine. And I know it's a little past Halloween, but the idea being I would load, I guess I could, sorry, I guess I should try to show it, but kind of loading up, I'm using 2-inch PVC pipe, and I loaded it with candy, and a way that you turn a handle and it'll give you some candy. So I know it's not much, it's like a step up than the big bowl that just says, please take one only, when you're not there for trick-or-treaters. So this one, the part that I had trouble, or the part I kind of struggled with, was how to pace it. So I kind of use this watermill design, kind of like the kind where it scoops up the water. And so,
Cool.
so that is kind of, if I positioned it right, in terms of, because I used it's called an elbow. I found this elbow joint that you can use for the PVC pipe. So having that L kind of gave it a little bit of pacing, but putting the watermill thing in front of it kind of puts the brakes on it until you turn the watermill part. So that is kind of what I put together.
It sounds good. I can kind of envision what you're doing. So what struggles are you running into?
Oh, at this point, well, it's funny because at first, my first one was I kind of created a sweeper type machine where it would sweep. It was like this rotating little, almost like a lazy Susan, but with like little fins on it. But then as soon as you enter the candy, it would just clump up. It would just pile into the top of the sweeper and you couldn't move it. So then I created a box above it that I kind of called the loader part, where I figured out the watermill part. But now as I'm putting the final build together, I was like, oh, I don't even need the sweeper part. I can just use the loader and make an exit chute underneath the watermill to deliver the candy.
Right, and that candy is going right back into the bowl, right?
Right, that's where the trick-or-treater puts their bag underneath there.
Right. Okay. I'm not sure I understand the watermill timer. Is that a mechanism you can use to time how often they come out, or is it just every time a student puts something under the mechanism, it
Okay, so I guess, should I try to show it? I'm not sure if my camera works.
We're seeing something.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, so I don't know if you can see this. So this is the watermill. So
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
so
Very cool.
so I need to. So I put the hole. I put the hole. This is the hole, and I was going to glue I have a liter bottle, a seltzer bottle that I'm going to use as the chute down there. But in terms of this mechanics, I haven't quite installed the 2-inch pipe, which they have here, and I have to make another hole here, and it'll install up here, and then it'll feed the candy, and then you turn the handle. So I have to make it a little bit lower, so that kind of puts the brakes on it until you turn the handle, and then a new cup comes. And I did have to, I did learn the hard way when I did it without this final build box, and now I can't get the thing out, but I had to figure out, I realized I had to make the inside, this smaller box slope towards the hole, because the water mill didn't catch every piece, and sometimes it would just sit there. So I had to kind of make some slides so that it would go towards so gravity would at least shove candy towards the hole. So so then I found this kind of thing, so that obviously this isn't decorated, and this was my mistake. This is a boo-boo. I was gonna make this the bottom, but figured out the other side. I found this kind of thing, which I'm gonna make as a turning handle.
Oh, cool.
Oh yeah.
So so this, I'm sorry, this is just not decorated yet. This is gonna say like trick or treat or something.
Yeah.
And then it's gonna say turn the handle, and in theory, when I final build comes up.
Yeah, no,
So
that's
that's the
awesome.
idea, that it would
Yeah.
deliver some candy. So that's the idea.
That is really cool. And that's your first time building something, it sounds like.
Yeah, yeah. I do a food stand, so I'm more of a food person. And I've done I do like arts and I do card making stuff. So which I know it's not related at all, but I do, I know I have all these boxes. So and like I said, I went to the like I said in the video, he says go to the store and just kind of walk around. And I know that I can't remember if I saw some other people using it, and he was talking about using PVC pipe.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
and it's pretty cheap. So that was the other plus. So that's what they used.
That's really
Yeah.
cool, Francis.
Yeah, that looks so cool.
Thank you.
I
Now-
love the watermill apparatus in the middle. I think that's a really cool way. Not something I would have come up with, and you did a really good job at putting it together. And I can see how it works. That's excellent.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, I've got nothing but great things to say. I think that's really neat.
Thank you so much. Because I was getting some feedback like, oh, you should put a motor on there. Oh, this. And I'm like, oh, I have no idea how to do any of that. So I had to kind of go really I don't know what the word is, much more mechanical, less electrical.
The
So,
course does
like
leave it pretty broad. They leave it open to you to kind of figure out what you're going to do. He'll give you some instruction on some of the, the smaller mechanics and stuff that you're going to use, especially in the next section. In the beginning, they just want to see that you can progress. Like you're going to try something, you're going to solve a problem, and you're doing exactly that with all this. You don't need all the expensive stuff. So you've come up with a problem, you've worked on that solution, you've made your prototype, and it looks great. That's awesome. If down the road you want to take this and learn how to do some mechanics or some robotics in some sort of way, you could easily set up a motor or something to get this to do something else. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to. The next section might get you to do something simpler, and sometimes when you're a beginner, it's easier to just take the baby steps and just learn, what am I going to make. I think in the last class he made a draw bot, which was just a motor inside a cup that would kind of vibrate around, and it would just draw like patterns on paper, which is really, really simple, really easy to make. And when you're a beginner, it's almost something that I would start with, something small, something easy to achieve when you're working with stuff you're not familiar with. I think this is a great idea, and you can take it there, but maybe at some point put it aside, work on something else, and then come back to it and add something else. So you could add, like I said, a motor or a timer of some sort. You could use an Arduino to time, as things go, or even a motion sensor. So if somebody put something under your cup or under the block there and wanted to get some candy, it would recognize that and turn the motor and then send candy into their bag. So you could eventually make this something like that, but don't think you have to, right?
Yeah, that's much further on down the road. It's much better to be successful now with what you've done, and you're successful. It's good. And then you can add to it. So good job.
Thank you so much. Actually, I do have a question. I know that in the lesson, the equipment list, he said you can get the Arduino or the more bargain version, and I did get the bargain version. Is that still applicable? Like, is the videos going to kind of go back and forth between the two types of kits?
Well, there are Arduinos at all sorts of different levels. this is one that is actually built off of an FPGA, and it's like $80. It doesn't do, by the way, I think this is a horrible project that shouldn't necessarily exist. It's the reason I keep it around. It doesn't do anything that the $8 knockoff, well, it does do a couple things the $8 knockoff doesn't do. But yeah, get the least expensive version. And then you can get more sensors and components and things, right? If you get the least expensive one, you get all these sensors and wires and jumper wires and fans and motors, and you get all sorts of fun stuff. Get the cheap one.
If I can say anything, I think, the cheap version is a way to go. You can get that and it'll have all the parts you need. So don't feel bad if that's the one you have. But if you do get the Arduino one, it comes with this book, and this book is awesome. This is what I used for my last project, and it has, different things in here. It has all the codes. It has everything you need to learn Arduino and to actually figure out these projects. So this saved me big time. I am not an electrical engineering into electrical engineering, but this book gives you the know-how about how to do it. So this is invaluable to me. I feel like if you're gonna buy the Arduino pack, that's why.
So you like it for the book?
I like it for the book. That gave me the instructions. I'm no expert, so.
No, I'm not either. So
Yeah.
okay.
But yeah, if you bought the I think it was the eLego or whatever, as long as it's an Uno board, they're identical in the pinouts and how they function. So even though the brand on it might look a little differently, it should function exactly the same way as all of the other ones, as long as they're in the Uno family of boards and whatnot.
Okay.
That's what I buy. I buy the knockoff ones because they're not. I guess they're not knockoff. They're just a different. Because it's approved. It's not like a shady thing. It's an open source platform. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which book was that you were sharing, Ryan?
It comes in the Arduino pack. So if you get the starter kit, you get this Arduino projects book. And it's great. It has, different projects in it. It gives you all the different parts and explains what they are. It's probably all backwards in the screen, but it explains everything for you. So I just thought for somebody that's starting out, it's such a useful thing to have. Of course, you can get the other kit or get both, because then you'll have, any of the parts you're going to need. But it doesn't matter for the projects that Mark Rober is going to run in his class. You could go one or the other. I just really liked it for this. Yes, I liked it for the book.
So, Francis, I would say, especially since you're beginning, you'll be happy with either.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, I just Googled Arduino projects book into Google, and it seems that there's a couple different university websites that have the PDF document of this book, because they don't sell it separately because they want it to only be part of the starter kit. But since it's an open source platform, it looks like there's a couple different resources for you to access the just the document of this project book for free online.
Yeah, there's
without
a lot.
being shady about it. Yeah.
There's a lot of getting started with Arduino. If you want to just Google getting started with Arduino, you'll see those two. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Did we confuse you even more? I'm sorry.
No. I just don't, because I know the session is they don't let you start looking at the videos until tomorrow. So I and I bought the Elegoo version weeks ago. So I'm just ooh, I hope, so, but everything you're saying is very encouraging. And I hopefully the video lessons are clear that way, that there's not that difference. And then if necessary, I could Google it, hopefully too.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Francis. And if you want to come back later, okay?
Okay.
Hang out with us. All right. Bye now. So back to our 4UP screen. All right. So we had a couple comments come in while we were doing this. 3D printing professor says, I'm kind of frustrated that this class is trying so hard to be everything to everyone. I feel like some basics would be good. All right. Let us know what basics you want, and we'll do what we can to provide them.
Yeah.
He also thought Francis's project was awesome, as do I. 3D printing professor, also pretty on it tonight, said the Drawbot was a project he almost didn't do because he thought it was too easy, but he did it and he learned a ton.
Yeah.
There's always something to learn. Always something.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it, right? Like you look at something like that and you go, you know, I don't need it, I don't want it, whatever. But it's something useful to learn. That was something, you know, I probably should have jumped into too. Like I didn't end up making the draw bot myself, but I remember looking right into that and thinking, you know, for my project, I was just going to use one motor to spin something, and that was something that I was going to try to have to figure out. So the reason I was talking about the book is because that's where I got my Zoetrope idea. At the very back of the book, there's a project for Zoetrope. So I thought, oh, maybe I could turn that into something. So that's what I used. But like 3D Professor said, you know, if you try one of the smaller projects and you do that first, you can learn a lot, and then you can move forward and do better. I sort of agree with his first comment too. I know this class is pretty broad. They kind of just leave it up to you. He gives you one thing and explains to you how to do that one thing, but then it's kind of up to you to go and do other things. And that's the challenge of this class. That's why I think it is really hard, especially when it goes from, you know, kids to adults. Like, what are you going to make? What are you going to do? It's kind of up to you. And a lot of the time in my group, I don't know about you guys, but I go and I try to share YouTube videos that I find. So if somebody's working on a project and I need to try to show them something that I don't necessarily even understand, I go and find that video and I'll send it to them, because then that maybe might help them to develop something. But it is a challenge. It is really hard to try to, you know, I know Monthly's trying really hard to hit on everybody's needs here, but it's a challenge, and to make your own thing is a challenge too. So yeah.
By all means. I know one question we had back at the beginning was, what is the difference between an AC and a DC motor? And for that, we would have to talk about what the difference between AC and DC current is. And that's a little bit of theory. But what I would say is this, use DC, because until you understand AC, most AC motors that you can buy are going to plug into the wall, and they can hurt you until you understand fusing and isolation transformers and things. So go DC, direct current. And direct current gear motors, because they're less safety concerns until you know more. Mm-hmm. So this is actually a geared motor out of the bottom of a microwave. I grabbed that when Frances was talking about maybe trying to turn her thing. But it's an AC motor, and hooking it up, you could potentially get hurt. So we would probably recommend you stay DC, direct current DC. So.
And in those Elegoo boxes, they have servo motors like that, or not servo, stepper motors like that.
Yeah, I think they have both, depending on the kit.
Yeah.
So
there you go.
It's got a little DC. It's a little DC stepper motor, 5 volts, so you can still rotate things just like you can with this one. Except this one, it just spins at one speed. This one, you can get it to spin at any speed, which is cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, if I don't know if I've probably cannibalized this box. I don't know what's left in here. But then they have this thing called a servo motor that you can get, and it can move to specific positions. Those are pretty cool, you know? So, yeah. Anyways, what else? I think that's it for our comments. This will show up in our YouTube comments now. The Arduino book, so you can get started.
Oh, nice.
I would recommend that you do some of the basic things in the book. Like, it'll tell you how to make a little LED flash on and off. And because you still have to get the software set up, and you got to do a lot of stuff just to get it working. It can get overwhelming. So go through a couple sample projects, have some successes, and then you'll have a better idea of what you can bite off and do.
Yeah. And to add to that, I think a really sometimes deceptively important part about working on projects that might seem really easy and sort of beyond your skill level is mastering sort of the basics and functions of the programs and tools that you're trying to learn how to use is vital to being really successful with using those tools regularly in a more consistent manner. There's been many times, especially with electronics and Arduinos, where I've gotten too far ahead of myself. I took a really big leap in trying to learn something new, which is incredible, but then obviously was met with total failure, and then had to learn how to deal with that. I think that starting with some of the smaller projects with the Arduino stuff will be really good, because there's probably going to be a lot of little errors that pop up here and then that are really simple fixes. Maybe this wire isn't making good enough connection. Maybe you forgot to plug in a ground wire. Maybe you have the wrong port selected in the software, and all the things I'm saying probably may seem like total nonsense right now, and that's okay. And experiencing those failures and figuring out how to deal with them, particularly using Google, is an incredible resource. If I did not have my smartphone and wasn't able to just look up every question I have all the time, I'd probably be, significantly less skilled, because it's such a privilege to be able to address any problem you have at any given moment. But that being said, going through those issues, those smaller projects, being confronted with those failures that are inevitable, and it's totally okay that they will happen, makes it so that way in the future, when you're working with these things more regularly, it's really easy for you to troubleshoot and fix your projects, because you've practiced dealing with that type of failure. That's my experience with working them, and my endorsement to, yes, please. It can be very fun and addicting to, I remember the first time I started using an Arduino, I thought it was so cool. Just very small things, like I push a button and this light turns on, and making something that did that was really satisfying. So go for it. Do those things, do those small projects. You'll learn a lot more than you think. And at the very least, you'll practice doing things correctly and create a really good foundation of basics that will set you up for success in the future.
Even just soldering, even just getting used to soldering, that when I started was really, really hard. So just to get used to that, I still have trouble with it. Like, I'm still pretty basic. So like to get in there and get that right is tough. It can be.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeff Wells says, thanks for the tip on the Arduino manual. I went cheap.
Nice.
I would recommend to get started cheap in this particular endeavor before you go out and, get the latest, greatest stuff. So by all means. Do we have any other questions? If not, I thought it might be a good idea to just show some basic soldering skills for the people that are coming up. But before we go down that route, I just wanted to know if anybody else out there in TV land had any questions or comments or things they wanted us to address before we start addressing things. So we'll give you a minute to do that. All right. I should get us a link for this next thing. So there's a ton of inexpensive soldering irons on Amazon. And for another course that I'm teaching on for engineers, I actually went out and I bought a bunch of them. And I think I've thrown most of them away. Good. But I was just looking in the $20 range, right? What's the $20 region? And one of the ones I didn't even key on is something called the Pine Sill. Pine 64, I think it is. And it's $25 from the manufacturer's website. It's $35 on Amazon. And it's got all these little replacement tips. You can either power it through a like a laptop power supply or USB-C. If you've got one of those high power USB-C chargers, it works really well for $25. I was blown away. Way outclasses anything else in that price range by leaps and leaps and bounds. So if you do have to solder something, you don't have to spend a ton of money. I do soldering for my job, and I've got a $100 station, which is great. You don't have to spend the money on it, though. What do you guys use? And I'll get a link to the Pine Cell going for you.
Yeah. I use, if you probably search type soldering iron into Amazon, and there's like probably a $15 kit that comes with the cheapest soldering iron money can buy, and a multimeter, and like a little spring coil stand for it. That's what I use.
Okay.
One of these stands, they're horrible. I try to tape. You see the yellow.
Mine's a little nicer than that.
I tape it to the. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I'll be right back. I'm gonna go get mine. I'm gonna turn off my camera. I'm gonna go get my soldering iron. I'll be right back.
Yeah, I don't like these stands. You're supposed to, with your soldering iron, put it in here and have it stand there so that it doesn't fall off the table. But what I find is it slides, right? It slides, and I don't like these. So mine is just taped to the table. I just use a bit of tape and it holds it there, and it kind of works okay. But I would love to have one of those, Mark. I already have one in my Amazon cart after you mentioned it last time, so I'm gonna get one for sure.
Guess what this does when you set it down on the table?
Don't tell me it has its own stand.
It just turns itself off.
Oh, well, there. That's
So
even
when you
better.
put it down flat on the table, right, it will turn itself off. It'll idle down at like 100 degrees C, and then when you pick it back up, it ramps back up to power.
Wow.
I didn't know about this until last week, by the way. I didn't know this thing
So
existed.
that's brand new.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Right on.
So yeah, the link's there. It is a refer link because, well, Mark likes his money. What are you going to do? But James, how about you, sir? We haven't heard from you much tonight.
No, you're fine. I
By the way,
apologize for jumping in. Yeah.
Hi.
Hello. It's been a hot minute, right? Yeah, I was absolutely the victim of referring to old links, which is always a bad idea. So here I am now. Yeah, so from soldering iron materials, I use a couple different ones, but
I'm losing him. Are you?
I'm
I'm
losing
also
James
losing
too. I thought that was me. Okay, James, you've got a
James.
bad connection, buddy. So maybe we'll get you back.
Yeah.
I
Have him come
think
back.
you're frozen. This is fun. Like, yeah, he won't move. He just won't do it. So, one of the issues that we identified with the cheap irons from Amazon is their
Do they-
open-ended systems.
Do they look like this?
Yeah. Does it have a LCD display or anything? It's got the little twisty thing, right?
Yeah, it's got a temperature control on it.
It gets way too hot. So that
Yeah.
temperature control, there's no feedback loop. It's got no temperature measurement in it. So there's no way to calibrate it.
Is that
Yeah.
real? It just keeps getting hotter and hotter and hotter.
It just keeps getting hotter and hotter and hotter. So usually when you melt solder, you only need to get like 10 degrees above the melt temp of the solder.
Yeah.
Right. So if it's a leaded solder, 180 degrees C's sufficient. If it's lead free, maybe you're at like 230 C. That one, and I'm pretty sure we took apart that exact one. It started at like 300 degrees C. Was the lowest temperature setting of the one that we tested.
That's what it says. Yep.
Now, that means you're risking melting the insulation off the wires. You're risking hurting yourself, right? Burning yourself. You've
My
done that,
fingers
I'm
are
sure.
the molding things. Yeah.
Right. The hotter it gets, the more risk it is. So at the very least, get one that's got an LCD display in it.
Mm-hmm.
These are still in the $25 range. But once I learned that the pine sill existed.
Oh yeah, it's on my list.
I
learned about it a few days ago.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this has that much longer lease in my life. We'll see. We'll see. Maybe this will get resigned to a bin that I never touch again. But yeah.
Yeah. And then James says, if you buy a cheap soldering iron, plan on replacing it when you start doing more Hakko soldering irons or premium irons with fine temperature control. I've got a lot of Hakko stuff. I love it. I agree with you, James. My soldering station is cheaper than that, but I mean, that's just because it hasn't broken yet. So by all means. All right. So let's demonstrate some basic soldering iron skills. Arg, get over here. So I've got a couple cameras set up for you guys. I was just going to show how to prepare a tip, tin it, and maybe I'll heat up a wire or something. Is there anything you guys want to show off? Or do you want to show off how to do that and I'll do something else?
Oh, no, you got it.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. Not it. Right?
Yeah.
Let you go ahead with that.
No, I don't have, this is like I don't have this isn't a good workstation desk for me.
No worries. Let's
look at you. You got the camera and everything.
Yeah, I'm ready to go on this. So my other class, I'm teaching electrical engineers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you've got a soldering iron and you're going to want some way to get the fumes out of your face, because when you start melting the flux that's in there, it makes this tremendous amount of smoke and it will go into you. I don't think it's all that healthy. So maybe have a little fan nearby or something. What I've got right here is a little thing that sucks it off. It's something I kind of like. Let me see if I can get on screen there with you. Now, when you first start using your iron, you're going to want to melt some solder on the very tip of it. And in your solder, if you do have to solder anything, maybe you don't, there's this acid called flux, and it will clean and displace all the contaminants and everything on your tip. So then you take it and you wipe it off, and your tip should be shiny and clean before you try to solder anything. So here's a little bit better of what that's going to look like. I mean, we're not seeing the, well.
Oh, did we just lose him?
Who's who?
Mark.
Oh, maybe.
There he is.
Sorry.
That's all right.
We lost me. Internet connection difficulties. But anyways, you want your tip to be shiny and clean before you go start using it. So can you kind of see that? Does that come through the video?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. It is really nice to have something to hold your iron so that you're not fighting, fire. Never a good thing. So then let's talk about doing a tiny bit of big soldering with wire, and then we'll talk about doing a little bit of soldering with components in case you end up going that route as well. Okay, James says, don't forget that solder contains lead. Yes and no. Most solders nowadays are lead free. So unless you go out buying leaded solder, you should be okay. All right. So one of the things when you have wires, if you take the insulation off, the wires are going to go everywhere, and that can make it kind of a pain in the butt to work with, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can use solder to hold the wires together. And one of the things that I usually do is I'll only partially strip the wires so that everything is kind of held together. And then because I don't have 1,000 hands, I'll take some of my solder and I will wrap it around a few times. And then I will take the iron, and depending on what kind of iron you have and what the wattage is, it might take a little while to heat everything up, but you want that solder to flow right inside that wire. And then you can finish removing the insulation, or you can cut it off, but then you've got a wire that isn't all splayed, so it's much easier to work with.
Yeah, that's so useful. I could have used this a lot when I was working on my hovercraft. I know I was trying to tie a lot of different types of wire together, and I never thought about that. I never thought about wrapping the solder like that, but that looks awesome.
Yeah, the other thing you can do too, if you've got multi-strand like this, and I was seeing if I had another piece so I don't have to just burn this. Here's just some big fat multi-strand wire. You can always strip this stuff back and actually wrap the wire with more wire, right? And kind of use that to tie it all together. This might take too long. I don't know. There we go. So then you can just kind of use it as cordage and wrap that around what you're working with. And then you just have to trim it off towards the end. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you guys want to share any tips before I share another one?
I mean, I'm not going to share any soldering tips here. If anything, I'd be in the 3D program showing you how to do something on the computer, but no, I probably am not the one to show you some solder skills here.
All right, Grant, how about you?
I feel similarly that soldering is one of those things that even though I've done it a lot, I still don't feel that great at it. Yeah, that's what I have. That's what I have to offer. But I'm enjoying watching you doing some soldering right now. It's been the last time I took a class that officially, instructed me how to solder was my freshman year of high school, which was about 9 years ago.
Yep.
Oh wow.
So it's been a while since I've watched somebody show me how to solder. So I'm watching.
No, I feel that way too. Like I think the last time somebody taught me was the same thing. It was a high school class. I went in there, we did some basic electrical work, and that was it. And then it was up to me to try and figure it out myself. And that was part of jumping back into the Mark Rober course and trying to get myself back into it, because it is a useful thing to know and do. And I mean, if you can do it like Mark Hughes over here, hey.
Yeah. I could ask you some questions, Mark, that I either have or have had at one point in my life that might be helpful to know.
I would be happy to answer them.
So what's a good range if you have a soldering iron that has an adjustable temperature? Let's say you're buying just whatever solder they sell at the store, at like the hardware store, that isn't anything fancy or super specific. What's a good range of temperature to have your soldering iron at that is a good enough temperature, or is there too much? Can I just turn my soldering iron as hot as it can possibly go and call it a day?
Oh, okay. Yeah, don't do that.
Okay.
So typically the way that it's going to work is for most soldering irons, whatever temperature it shows on your dial is just not going to be accurate.
Yeah.
Do I have that one that I had a minute ago? Yeah, here we go. So these things are all pretty typical. I'm going to go big here. These things all have a tip retainer. They've got the tip, and then in here is a ceramic heating element and a little temperature measuring element. And if you ever play with these on most soldering irons, they're loose and they rattle around. That's not good. That's just what happens on the inexpensive ones. So since there is that air gap between the heating element and the tip, there's going to be a difference in temperature readings. So back to, well, what temperature do I set it at? Well, go down to the lowest temperature and sit there and try to melt solder on your iron. And if you start off at 300 degrees, it does take 30 seconds, a minute to get down to, say, 180 is where you should start. And if the solder melts at 180, perfect, use that. But it probably won't. So you go up to 200. Does it melt there? No, it doesn't melt there. Okay, so let's go up another 205. Does it melt there? It does. Okay, so then you want to start. With that as your low, and maybe go up to 215. Your soldering iron's only going to be able to dump so much heat into your component, right? If you've got a big piece of copper, like you're soldering a big copper wire, you have to go to a higher temperature, because as you touch it, energy goes from the tip into the wire, and the soldering iron cools down faster than the soldering iron's able to keep up with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it does.
You don't want to be way, way, way hotter than the thing. Otherwise, you'll damage components, right? You can melt through the insulation on connectors. You can melt through your skin. You can melt through all sorts of stuff. So just 5 or 10 degrees above the lowest temperature that your solder will melt at. This iron is not on. This is not the one that I'm using. For those people who are wondering,
why are you grabbing the hot part?
No, the hot one's in a holder. It's sitting right here.
No, Mark's just done so much soldering that he doesn't feel it anymore.
Yeah.
So I wonder with an iron like this that doesn't have an adjustable, do you know how hot one of these would get? Because these just turn on. You just plug them in, and it just goes. Do you know how hot these get?
A low end is 300. Okay, so I'm not just making these numbers up. We did this in an experiment, and we did this thing called Soldering Station Showdown in my other class,
Yeah.
and we put a FLIR camera on these things.
Oh, nice.
And those things, like the low end, they're 60 degrees Celsius hotter than they need to be.
Right. So these are way too hot.
Way too hot.
Yeah.
So you're exposing yourself to additional risk, maybe potentially hurting yourself.
Yeah. Because
not
I noticed with this, it was either not doing the job where I couldn't get the solder to melt, or it was just cooking it, and it was
Yeah.
just you could tell it was way too hot. But I
Yeah.
couldn't figure out how to get it to work the way I wanted it to. It just seemed like it was one or the other, and I couldn't get it right. So I'm going to invest in that other one that you've suggested.
Yeah, give it a shot. Now, if you are doing more precision stuff, I'm going to change cameras here to a microscope cam.
Oh, wow.
Boom, boom, boom. So here we've got all these really, really tiny pads, and you're looking at that and you're thinking, oh my gosh, how does that work? Well, let's take a quick look at one, because this is what electronics are moving to nowadays. It's all this really, really tiny stuff, and it can be kind of a pain in the butt. This is a container full of parts that are going to go on those pads. So I'm just going to open that up, and I'm going to teach you something else that you should be doing when you solder that will make your life much, much, much easier. And that's called flux. So when you have spools of soldering wire like I have, they've got a chemical in them, and that chemical is called flux. And it has two jobs. One, it cleans the surfaces, the pads, and it removes oxides and dirt and other stuff. And number two, it prevents more oxides and other stuff from forming. All right, let me get this thing lined up, and then I'll show you what we're going to do. So flux is a chemical, and you can actually buy it in these little tubes and containers. And if you put it on your wires, not only will it clean the wires to make the solder attach better, it's sticking.
Oh,
Stop it. Stop it. Stay there. I've got a little tool here. It's just a little dental pick that I sometimes will set on these so I don't have to chase them around the board. But it makes soldering easy. Like super easy. So this is a really tiny part. I don't really have anything for reference. Maybe it's the size of a sprinkle on a cupcake.
You may have to adjust the camera when you're done there.
Oh, let's just do it now.
Yeah.
Thank you. I've got a wider field of view in my microscope than
the camera does.
Yeah. But then that also makes it magnified for you guys to a greater extent. So I'm going to have a little bit of solder on the end of my iron, because again, if it's shiny and clean, it's going to conduct heat better. And if it's liquid and whatnot, it's going to conduct heat better. So I'm just going to heat that up. And I don't know if you can see the flux boiling.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So we just want to do it. And that's not a great solder joint, but nobody watching will know that. But we just want to heat it up enough that we can melt and make a connection. That one's better. So use flux. That is my other tip. It makes things flow much easier. So for example, we can look at a wire. This is a much bigger wire. And I'm going to wrap some solder around it. I've got an angry cat here in the corner. Let me put him up on the desk. Otherwise, he's going to jump up and get into trouble. There you go, big guy. Okay. So here's my wire. Here's my flux. And hopefully what we'll see here is that the flux will liquefy and spread and melt first. And then the solder next, although this is a big honking piece of wire. I might have, it's just sucking the heat right out of the gun. This is a situation where you'd want to turn up the temperature to be able to successfully get this going. Yeah, there's no way I can put enough heat into it with this little iron, but there is something else I can do. I can put industrial amounts of heat. Let's get on camera here.
Oh, wow.
What are you using for that? A heat gun?
Yeah. I kind of probably should have been looking. But anyways, obviously need some more solder there, but you can totally see it starting to flow. And that's what the flux helps do. So we kind of carbonized that silicone surface. Sorry, little guy. You served well.
Served a good purpose, that's for sure.
It was a good purpose.
Yeah.
So then the last thing I'll show here, and then I'll take some more questions, is we'll watch that go on a pad. Like, let's say we want to solder some wires for a battery connector, which is what this is. Which one's positive? Which one's negative? I don't know. This is a soldering practice kit off Amazon. I don't know that this thing actually does anything, so I don't really care. But one of the issues that you have is that this stuff tries to, it all tries to move around. And if you're fighting the part moving, the wire moving, while everything else is moving, it's just really frustrating. So usually what I tell people to do, and this isn't a beginner tip, this is an everybody tip, is get something big and heavy and pin it down. So there's a big mass there that's just sitting on the edge of the wire. So now it can't go anywhere. So when I stop giving people motion sickness, there we go. So now when I go to solder this wire on, all I have to worry about is getting enough wire on that pad that I get a solder fillet. Whoop. And then just leave it there until you see the metal flash over and change temperature, and then you know that it's attached.
Now these practice soldering kits, can you get, where'd you get yours? Did you get yours online?
Yeah, Amazon, eBay.
Would you recommend
wherever.
Students to get something like this?
No. For Mark Rober's class?
Yeah. This
would be an advanced student that would ever need to solder stuff this small.
Right.
But I have it handy, and showing things like attaching wires to a board. Like, I could imagine somebody using a piece of perf board. So use flux, hold stuff down. Those are the only two lessons that I'm trying to use. There's really no situation I can think of where you'd have to solder tiny stuff like this unless you're buying some kit.
Right.
And it's in it. So with that, cool lighting, huh?
Yeah.
I don't know if you can tell, but I use scope covers on my microscope, and I
That
put
have
googly eyes on top.
That's
Oh my
awesome.
goodness, that looks great.
Perfect.
So the question from Jeff is, do you have to clean the flux residue afterwards? That's
a great
question. Yes. Flux is an acid. And while we're using it for its acidic properties to clean before we solder, if you leave it on, it will continue to degrade and erode connections over time and destroy your connections. It'll eat through the copper eventually. So yes. Were those all surface mount? Yeah. So the course I'm teaching is a surface mount course. We're designing our own printed circuit boards. That's why I picked a surface mount example. I'm using that in my demos for the course. I had that handy, and I'm too cheap to go out and buy something else for this one. Sorry. But you can clean it, by the way, with just isopropyl alcohol, Jeff. You don't have to get anything too fancy.
Oh, cool. That's what I was going to ask. I was like, do you put your thing under the sink?
As long as you're not dealing with sensitive electronics, sure.
I guess that's fair.
Yeah, you could use soap and water. Like if you're just dealing with wires and whatnot, I mean, I would use 95% isopropyl because it's going to go so much faster.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine it hurts anything as long as you dry the moisture out later.
Right.
Let me kill that real quick. What other questions can I answer for you about soldering and electronics? Anything you've ever wanted to know? I have the answers. All of them.
Okay, this is a good question. I've seen all over the place either using like a wet sponge to clean your soldering iron tip or one of those like steel wool type things that you that is dry, but is there a difference? Is one of them better? Do they achieve the same thing? What is your preference?
That's a great question. I always use the metal sponge.
Yes.
So the problem with the regular sponge is that you put water on it and you wipe it off. Water, when it undergoes a phase change, can absorb a ton of heat energy.
Yeah.
So as soon as you do that, you're dropping the temperature on your iron.
Gotcha.
So that's why I prefer the metal one. Now, there are times I'm out in the field and that's all I have. Sure. You just clean your tip and you wait a few seconds before you go to solder.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Good to know.
Yeah.
I was curious.
How often are you cleaning your soldering iron? Do you do it every time?
Every time.
Yeah. Okay.
You might have heard, just like a characteristic, like every time I put that thing away, it goes into the metal sponge first, and then off from there. You can get, by the way, if you don't want to chase your thing around, we were talking about Hacko, but there's other ones too. You can get these things to hold your soldering iron for you, so you're not chasing it around. And they even have them too, where there's like a roll of, you can put a spool of solder there.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. James, I think, asked, what gauge and melting point would you recommend for the solder for electronics projects? Lead is bad now, and that was the low melting temperature stuff. So I don't even know if you can get it in a lot of places anymore. But it's not good for the environment. It's not good for you. You do have to wash your hands all the time. So everything you're using is ROHS, ROS-free, Reduction of Hazardous Substances Act, I think it is, ROHS. And most solder you're going to see is like SAC 305. That's fine. Just figure out what your set temp needs to be appropriately. If I'm doing electronics, I get the thinnest gauge I can, like 1/64 of an inch, because you can always add more. But if I was soldering like these big behemoth wires all day, every day, I would certainly get something thicker, much thicker. Maybe even thicker than this stuff. And I don't know what gauge that is. This is like 1 millimeter diameter. But it just depends on what you're doing. get something so that you're not spending too much time on it, but that you can apply just as much solder as you want. So pretty cool to see it under the microscope. Yeah, that was an okay. It was an okay demo. I've done better, but what other questions you have?
I think that's it for me. I'm not sure what else I can ask here.
We could talk about switches maybe real quick.
Yes.
So there are a ton of different types of switches, and you don't have to solder your wires to the end of them. You can actually get, and they're really cheap, you can get crimp kits with quick disconnects that are really, in most cases, so much easier to use. So you get these little connectors, and they come in. I need to go to another camera here. Where is my... They come in a lot of different gauges based on how thick your wire is, and they come in insulated and uninsulated. And the cool thing about these is you can get them and you can slide them right onto the end of your switches. So a lot of switches, especially, they even have this stuff in the auto parts store. So you would go and you would get your wire and you would slide it onto the end. And do I have a crimper handy? Here's a crimper. Oh, I need a wire. That's the wrong gauge. Sorry, give me a second here. I need... Oh, and ferrules too. I should show you ferrules. Okay. So anyhow, you basically, you take your wire, you put it in the right gauge for your thing, and then you crimp it down. So I just pulled out something called a, it's not really a ferrule, but I should get those too. But basically you take your wire and you just shove all the strands in there and you crimp the crap out of it, like, rawr! And then instead of worrying about your wire coming loose or doing anything, you can just slide that wherever it needs to go and tighten it down.
Oh, that's
you would
useful.
you would want to only have as much sticking out the back so that there's no uninsulated wire, right? You would want it to look more like that. Right before I had copper showing, you'd want to make sure that it goes in there like that. And then they have these things called ferrules that go right over the end, and you can take your messy spaghetti wire strands of wire and you can put a ferrule over it and you can crimp those and put it into a screw down terminal block or anything like that too.
And you wouldn't have to solder any of that then. That can just get jammed right in the end of those, and that's easy.
Yeah, if this was the right size
Yeah.
It's obviously not. I mean, I can't even get the insulator over it, but if this was the right size, I could just crimp it on the end, and then when I'm ready to use the switch, I just slide it right onto the end of the switch. Easy peasy.
Yeah.
Batteries not required. So, would you replace those with soldered connections for the final build? No, I would not. There's nothing wrong with crimp connections. Most of your cars put together with these. And in fact, if you're doing anything with high current, you have to assume that if there's like a short circuit condition or something, that the wire will heat up and the solder will melt and you'll lose your electrical connection. So you actually, for high current stuff, prefer crimped connections over soldered connections.
Interesting. Yeah.
All good questions, James. All right. What else can we do for you? I don't like it being the Mark show.
Well, you went into the soldering section here, so not sure I can do much there, but
something, I've it's part of my day job. It's no problem at all. And I didn't even do that good of a demo.
No, it was good. No, I've learned a lot here. Like I didn't know as much as I would know now about crimp connections and flux and all this stuff. So I think it's a useful thing to know for sure. Whether it's a, you know, even though it's not going to be boards, they're probably going to be soldering. They still get something out of it, right?
Yeah.
And you know, in the next section, I think he gets more into this stuff, right? He gets more into the electronics and whatnot. So, yeah, looking at this might give them a little bit of an idea of how to go about it. So,
Yeah, and one other thing too. I just showed you guys how to connect to a switch, but they also have, and again, you can get these things in like $30 kits, $20 kits. You know, you get the crimper and you get a bunch of connectors. You can get these butt-in splices too. So you connect a wire from both ends. You put a wire in each side and you crimp them down, and you know, you can make your wires longer with no soldering.
that's great.
Let me see if we can find a link for you, and then we'll leave that in the comments so that if you guys don't want to go, where I need a keyboard. Sorry. I've got too many switches. I've got the video switcher, and then I've got the crimp kit. Crimp
everything over there. Your overhead cameras and everything. It's good.
I've got 8 cameras.
Damn.
Yeah,
What do
it's
you
ridiculous.
use? What do you shoot with?
Oh, it's funny. I got all of this stuff at an auction.
Nice. Like all 8 cameras.
Well, no. Some of them I bought separately. Here is a link. Let me share this with you. So these things, I didn't even know about it because I wanted the camera lenses. There's this this thing called a telecentric lens, which is great for machine vision stuff. And because it doesn't distort the video. And I found a bunch of these at auction. Usually they're like $600 lenses, and they were going for like $5 and $10. So I bought a bunch of these. Well, what had happened was the factory that was getting rid of those, they were too lazy to unscrew the lenses off of the camera bodies.
Oh.
So they just cut all the wires and, you know, threw the lenses at me. So I get home and I've got all these cute little cameras, right?
Those are awesome.
Little, oh yeah, they're neat, man.
Yeah.
So I've got all these cute little cameras, and unfortunately, the wires were cut so short there wasn't really much I could do with them. There weren't even stickers to tell me what type of camera they are. Well, eventually I tracked them down, and I got a hold of the salesperson for the for these cameras. There's only one guy in like the whole Western region, and I'm like, yeah, I got these things. He's like, well, tell me a little more about where you got them. You know, because he was a little suspicious that maybe I'd stolen them or something.
Yeah.
So I'm like, no, I just, you know, I bought them. And he's like, okay, well, do this. And, you know, and he showed me how to pull up a serial number. So I pulled up a serial number and said, where'd you get them again at this place? And I showed him the auction link. Like, those things are like $400 a piece.
Jeez.
I'm like, what? And I'm like, well, they're useless to me because there's no connectors. Send me your address. It was like, well, hold on. If the cameras are this much, how are the connectors? I'm just going to send them to you.
Wow. Wow, that's one way to luck out. That's awesome.
Well, I guess when you have that much. So I've got these cameras that, you know, they go in, they're like 60 frame per second. They're great. My lighting sucks, but the cameras are great. So
yeah.
That's
wonderful. When you guys did the class, I'm just curious, like, how did you go about posting your projects? Because I found with the monthly program, it was kind of weird to post pictures and video. Did you have an issue with it?
I YouTubed and linked to YouTube.
Yeah,
because that's what I did as well.
Yeah, I found that was easiest. But when I went to go post a video straight from my phone to monthly, I found that was difficult. Like it wouldn't upload certain sizes. And I don't know what it's like this year, but I feel like that's something they should improve on for sure.
There's a few things that monthly might improve on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one thing, well, I don't know if we should have these discussions here. We can have these discussions privately.
Fair enough. I just thought I'd bring that up because I did have trouble and I wondered if you guys had to, but I went the same route. I ended up doing YouTube videos and posting it there because then you could do more of a long-term video and show your whole project and try to explain exactly how it works and what it does and then get a good look at it too. So
yeah. I will say I really enjoy when people post videos. Pictures are great and detailed text explanations are also great. But going through the like the what is it called, peer group page, every time I see a video, I always watch them all in their entirety. It's so great watching people show their builds like in real life and with motion, and I always really appreciate when people make videos.
I'm with you. The only thing I hate are pencil sketches on lined paper. I can't figure out what's going on.
Yeah. That's fair. That's fair.
Use printer paper and pen, people. Printer paper and pen.
Mark wants more contrast. I like contrast. Contrast is helpful.
Some of the best designs were designed on napkins, okay?
Oh yeah, no, the classic napkin sketch.
That's right.
I don't care. I can't see it.
Fair.
So, well, when would you guys like to meet again? It doesn't have to be at night. It can be whenever.
This time actually works best for me, just because I typically work in the mornings. So this gives me time to get home and like eat and take a breather before diving into this. But I don't you don't have to wait up for me if another time works for everybody else, but not me.
No, this time-wise works for me. Days, come and go. It depends on if I'm working in the morning, early in the morning or not. But yeah, usually this time is great. I think it's 6 o'clock for you guys when you start.
Yes.
Yeah, 6.
And it's 9 here. So later is fine for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I'd love to get James back. I know he had some connection issues, but he's a wealth of information. And Chris too. I love having those guys around.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
How about users, people that are out there? What would you guys like to see? Because we just kind of wing this stuff. There's really no prep work involved. So if you have any requests, we'll do that. Any last tips going into the Arduino, the build number 2, while we're waiting for people to hear what I just said and respond?
I think just to touch back on maybe what we said earlier is just don't bite off more than you can chew, right? If you are a beginner at this, look at the projects that even Mark's working on, or try to find something that's achievable for you. It might not be something that's super exciting to you, and I'm not saying don't go for that. You can definitely try and go for something big, but it's definitely going to be a lot harder for you to get that project done in the time that he's allocating for yourself. So try to get, if you're going to work on a project that's new to you, try to just not bite off more than you can chew, and work on something slowly. If you have a good idea, you can always implement that into your design later.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's absolutely right. Be successful first. You can set a goal, and then you can have a stretch goal beyond that, but go for success first. That's one of the things that is so difficult for new designers. Until you've had some successes and some failures under your belt, you're not going to know what your capabilities are. So we'll try to help you with that where we can, but everybody's different. But it's okay to have a small success. I would rather you have a small success than a big failure while you're getting started out. Failure is part of the learning process. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't be your first experience in it, because then it's discouraging.
Yeah, I have seen many projects that use very little components and very simple code, sometimes not even code, and have done some just absolutely mind-boggling things that I look at and I'm just so impressed with. So it's important to know the project isn't how do I make the most complicated project, or how do I make the most elaborate project. Not knowing a whole lot about it sometimes can be a good thing, because you aren't familiar with the limitations and the traditional uses of all of the sensors and components with all of the electronics kits. And you might end up doing something that nobody else has thought of that involves a very simple set of technology, but you could implement it in a super creative, interesting way and still have a home run of a project with a battery and some wires and a light. If you do something really clever and creative with it,
Yeah, I mean, even the project I showed at the beginning, it was really clean and he did it really nicely, but it was so simple when you look at it. All it was a spring that he would push and turn that knob, and that would just let the pills drop. And that's such a useful thing for people to have, supplements or pills dispense that you at your, at your disposal, like whenever you want them, is great. And it's just such a simple mechanism. It's just a button that you turn, but it's beautiful. It's a beautiful design. It's well done. Yeah, you just got to think of something simple and work on that.
Yeah. I was thinking, I can share with you. I was looking for our soldering station showdown. I was going to share with everybody, just in case you want to see more about soldering. Oh, here it is. This is my corporate account. I don't really do much with this channel, so I don't really care if you subscribe or not. I'm not going for monetization.
I'll subscribe.
But this is my corporate account. And if you want to subscribe there, I actually put some pretty useful content. A lot of it's geared towards electrical engineers, but things like that soldering station showdown that I have linked below at that weird link, whatever that is, you might find useful. It's fun. It's the same format that we have here, just with a different audience in mind. Mm-hmm. So,
no, it's wonderful.
Yeah, you guys, I think will definitely enjoy it. So. Anyways,
yeah, I could probably make use of this for sure.
Yeah. Well, Grant and Ryan, I sure thank you for your time. I know we went a little longer than we anticipated, but thanks for hanging it out with me.
Of course.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Of course. I love hanging out with you too. It's great.
Yeah. And Francis, there's Francis. You hung out the whole time.
What?
Oh, we're muted.
Yeah.
She's
sorry,
muted.
Did I move? Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
A lot of it went over my head because I don't know if these classes are starting at different paces, but I haven't started the electrical part yet. I'm just doing my final build, which, by the way, I don't know if you want to see. I finally got this working, so I don't know. I don't know if you want to see it. So I attached the. Sorry, I know I just went totally off topic, but
we do.
I installed the 2-inch PVC. I made a little decoration here. I've attached the little 1 liter bottle soda thing to be my chute. And I put some candy in the thing. So I can just see. So then I turn this handle and.
Love it.
Oh my God, I want candy.
Wow.
So,
that's awesome.
Wow, that works great. That's awesome.
I've got this kind of working.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's awesome. A working prototype. That's wicked. And you did a little design on the side there. Treat yourself. I like it.
Yeah. And I had there was even little things like I didn't think about, like to keep this middle axle from moving. I had to kind of put a stopper. I'm sure there's some real like engineering kind of tool, but it's just cardboard and tape I put there. But that's to keep the axle moving. So I was listening and I was watching, but that kind of was going over my head because I didn't know what that's for. I'm assuming it's kind of like the equivalent of like welding something, but like on a much smaller scale for the next section.
That's exactly it. So you don't have to do any of that. I just figured that some people might want to. Make their wires longer than the wires that come in the kit or do something a little different. So since we didn't have anything else to talk about, I figured I'd show off some of those skills.
Well, I saved all those links and everything. I copied. I've got all these tabs open. So hopefully I'll save it and then it'll make sense to me once the next section opens up.
Yeah, a lot of the boxes you get with the electronics actually have what they call breadboards. So they're just slots that you can slot your wires into, and you can hook it up that way. So you don't actually have to weld or solder anything together. You can just connect it using the breadboard and the parts that they give you. So you don't necessarily have to do all this. This is just a much more solid way of connecting things if you're going to finalize a project. So it's a good way to tie everything together when you're finished, but you don't have to. My project is still on the breadboard. It's still just wires that are plugged into a breadboard, and it still works. So you can do it one way or the other.
And maybe next time we can do something with the breadboard. I don't know.
Sure.
That'd be fun.
Yeah. So, Francis, you did a good thing.
Thank
Yeah,
you so
for
much.
sure.
I appreciate the encouraging words. I do, really. Thank you.
Well, you don't need our encouragement. You can look at it and you can see that it works. And that was
Yeah.
all you, kid.
Well, thank you. And like I said, hopefully, I don't know if these are going to happen weekly or bi-weekly, but hopefully the next time I'll know a little bit more because of the next section.
Well,
we'll start.
We don't have a very good way to notify the students. James, by the way, says thank you. You did a good job. So we don't really have a way to notify you other than the way that we've been notifying you, which is to make a post ourselves.
Yeah.
So we'll figure out when we're going to do next week's. Do you guys want us to pick a day now? And then we'll do it's going to be 6 o'clock, same time.
Yeah.
What day would you guys like to pick?
Ooh, maybe it's useful. I'm going to look at the upcoming schedule and see if, okay, I can't look at it that far in advance. I was going to just
No.
look at the next classes and projects to see if we could align something there. But
I sort of like the Tuesdays. I
yeah,
sort of
Tuesdays
like them,
is fine for me.
but I'm open to anything really. As long as you're doing it this time, I can put the day aside. So
Want to just do Tuesday,
Same.
Friday again?
Sure.
Yeah, that works
Okay.
for me.
So Tuesday, Friday, 6 o'clock, this YouTube channel.
Great. That's also helpful. That way, if it helps us work against the sort of difficulty reaching people, if it's a
Right.
consistent time and place, other than providing the exact link, at least despite our news blurbs about it, there's a consistent time that it happens.
Yeah. We could post it once and then people will know from now on, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. Thank you for those of you watching, and thank you, Francis, for joining.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Francis.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thanks for sharing your build. It looks awesome. And it works
Yeah.
cool. That's
Thank-
I think it's really cool.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Till next